Hello, everyone. It's no surprise that it's Wednesday and we're here with Ricky Williams. Today, we also have a wonderful guest, Bren Bigelow, who we met at the NORWAC conference this year. Bren made quite an impression on us by just being a very vibrant human being. So, Bren, we have brought you on to this show. On this show, we've talked a lot about gender and astrology. We did a queer culture versus straight culture episode for Pride Month. And I think we've had one or two other queer identified people on the show, but we wanted to bring you on to just talk with us about culture and astrology. But today I really want to bridge the topic of astrology as identity politics. Okay, so, you know, race issues are identity political, gender issues, queer issues are identity political. And so I want to elevate astrology into the identity politics conversation. It's like some people think astrology is not should not be in a university, but I would say it should be under identity politics. So let's actually start with, what do you guys think identity politics is, or how would you define that term?
Ricky, do you want to take this one first?
I have no idea, but just based on the words, I would say something about someone's identity in the context of a larger group.
Nice. That's I would say that's a good start. I would say identity politics does cover a lot of, okay, the politics around how we identify and how that interfaces with the community around us. There's this idea that you should just be able to identify with that whatever you want. And there, one of our hosts of the Gender and Astrology show tackled this a lot, and that's a queer non-binary identified person, where they were saying that there's different subsets of queer theorists. Some say that there's the neo gender people who are like, whatever you say you are, you are. Like if I have long hair and makeup on, I'm like, I'm he, him. They say you can do that because it's all about what you say you identify as. But some other people say you have to kind of play the role or look the part so that people read you as that gender. And so it's like, I think there is something about the interface of self with others in identity politics. So, okay, Bren, what do you have to say about it?
Oh, absolutely. So that is an amazing thing that you're bringing up because I am a non-binary trans person. So my identity is very much based in like fluidity. And so as you're talking about these gender politics things and like that, it is really interesting in our society that certain gender markers indicate certain, genders. Like, for example, like wearing a dress might be more feminine, at least in our culture and society. So to fit into that, like if you want to be perceived as a woman, for example, then you would want to lean into those like gender norms for women within our culture. But that's not the same across all cultures. There are certain cultures where people men wear dresses or things of the like, and it's not seen as emasculating or feminine. So I think it depends on the culture, but also, yeah, for me personally, I am more in the wheelhouse of like, it doesn't really matter what you wear or how you're presenting. It is about like how you feel on the inside and how you just want to be approached or addressed. Like, it doesn't because I'm a non-binary person and I do dress feminine, and a lot of people like, well, she, her, me, or like assume that I am a woman, but that's just not the case. And if they assume that, that's fine, that's on them, but they don't actually see the full picture of who I am. That's at least how I feel about my gender identity within that. But I'm kind of curious to know like what you're wanting to bring in like this conversation within the astrology landscape.
Mhm. Well,
Well, hold on. I have one thing, couple of things that come up. The first question, and it seems obvious to me, and I think maybe the second one is why. But the first question is like, why do we have to identify as anything?
Labels. That's so interesting. I guess for me, like I identify as a trans non-binary person because when I give that label to other people, then I feel like they can understand who I am more. Because I feel like when people assume I'm a woman or something, they put me in a certain box that I don't feel like I entirely fit into. And I'm also kind of,
I'm sorry. I apologize. It's just me, but I feel like these are like white people problems. You
ooh,
know,
tell me more about
because I mean, like if we go back to slavery, and I imagine the slave talking to the master about identity, this is again my ethnic background comes from that perspective, and it would never occur It would never occur to a slave, to an African slave, to identity. It's not even a consideration.
You feel like it's a luxury item to be able to have an identity?
Well, I don't even think it's, I mean, luxury. I don't even think, again, from my perspective, I don't even think it's a positive thing because see how it ties everyone all up in knots?
Well,
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
It's like for me, I don't care. I don't care what people I think I am or identify me as because it's just temporary. The lasting impression is the way I show up, the way I behave, and that's the impression that I make on the other person. And to me, that's the only identity that's important to me.
Is like humanhood.
Well, the impact. So if I think that's a wonderful definition for humanhood, but to me, the value of a person is the impact that they make on me. And if I'm around someone and they're just talking shit, and I'm like, oh, right, they're not saying anything that makes any sense, then that person at that moment in time doesn't have much value to me. If someone is saying things that are getting me to think and really opening my mind as a Gemini, those things have value to me. And so I have a choice of the environment that I choose to be able to have the impact made on me that feels best to me. And vice versa, right? Because if someone is around me, they're going to be educated in something. I can't help it, right? I'm just always spitting off information. And if the person doesn't care and they don't want to open their mind or be educated, then I don't have very much value and I'm not going to make a positive impact on the person. And I
oh,
think
I get
when we start talking about identity, I think we lose. And I think I think this is what we're trying to get to. When we talk about the outer layer, the identity, we lose sight of that there's something deeper in there.
Well, okay, so I get what you're saying about the liminal influence that we have on people for the temporary moment that we're together. I mean, we could look at, Bren and you and I and say, like, did we have a good hour together? And that's who we are as people in that moment. But let's talk about branding, Ricky. Like when you had to quit football for being a weed smoker and then you branded your business as called Heisman. That's an identity. I mean, a brand is an identity. Don't you think
But
branding?
it's one that I'm not attached to, right? It's a game. It's playing with things to see the effect, the impact that a certain label can have in a certain moment. But when we try to make it fixed or stable, that limits freedom, right? If I have to be identified as something, before I make a choice, I always have to ask myself, does this align with this identity? I think this is how we got into the issue in the first place because someone decided what it means to be identified as a this or a that, and the more we buy into it, right, it makes it worse. We think that we're dodging the arrows, but we spend all our time dodging arrows that we're not really doing anything meaningful.
Let's let Bren respond to that. Bren, why do you think it's important to identify?
Well, for me, to identify as like a genderqueer person is important just because like it gives context to like the world that I'm living in and how I perceive things and how I feel about myself. But I guess I wanted to ask more questions. Like Ricky, you're bringing up some really interesting things. I just like am really curious, like how like you relate yourself with identity because like how do you identify or do you at all because like there's a lot of different identities we have which is gender race like
That's what
education.
when someone asks that question, that forces me to identify. Right. That's the whole. That's where. And if we buy into that, then they got us. We're
Okay, well, do
stuck.
you identify as a Gemini?
But when we say identify, like even this, right? I would go to the details of I identify as someone who is vitalized by things that are related to what astrologers talk about when they say Gemini. But that's not an identification. That's an expression of my experience through the lens of astrology that I've been given. But when I'm fixed to say I'm a Gemini, and that means I have to be like this or this or this, that no, but I can appreciate, right? To me, the point of astrology is to help gain a greater appreciation for all of me. And I think when I try to identify, I have to take away from something here to identify as this. It just doesn't feel
Yeah,
good.
okay, I'm not afraid to argue with Ricky because, well, I don't know. Because I'm a sun square Mars. Okay, so this is the thing, is like, okay, I identify as a Scorpio, but my sun is at 2947 Libra. And the reason I identify as a Scorpio is because when you meet me, you're going to expect to meet a Libra, and really you're going to meet a Scorpio. Like it's like I act way more Scorpio than I do Libra. I have Mercury in Scorpio ruling my Gemini rising chart conjunct my sun. I am absolutely more Scorpionic. So it's important for me to identify with Scorpio to communicate to the receiver what they might receive when talking to me.
See, but then I think you limit the expression of Libra. Because, right, because when we say I identify as a Gemini or Scorpio, what we're talking about is we're identifying with what people in the past have agreed upon. And I think that might have worked in the past, but we're in the Aquarian age. I think it's our duty to contribute something new. And I think once we identify as a Gemini, it limits the kind of Gemini, the Gemini expressions that can, new, authentic Gemini expressions that can manifest.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would like to add to this conversation too, because all of our charts are very fluid. Transits are impacting it, and like we might be feeling more Libra in one moment and then more Scorpio in another, depending on what's in the sky and how our lives are going, maybe. But they're all different aspects of ourselves. There's always like energies playing out that are more complex. There's a lot of nuance within astrology and identity politics, I suppose. So I guess my question to you, Ricky, too, is like, if we're just thinking of things like in the big picture of things, how do we make sense of the world we live in if we live so broad, I guess, if we don't have those labels to kind of like, identify parts of us so we can understand ourselves more.
Yeah, like what if you're going out
But
dating
it's
and you
but
need
this is making things complex to make them more simple. The point I'm trying to make is just notice how the mind keeps justifying this perspective without questioning. Because to me, my mentor says you're an infinite being, right? You're an infinite being, right? That I can identify as that because that allows infinite expression of potential and possibilities. And I understand we're learning astrology, but it hurts my stomach and it hurts my heart when we think we know what Gemini or Scorpio or any of those things really are. We have a sense, but as soon as we decide we know what it is, we shut off to any real awareness about what they can be, what the possibilities are. And again, this is my ninth house Gemini sun expressing itself, right?
which you seem to identify with right now.
But again, right now in this moment, I'm expressing it, and this is right. It's not a matter of defending against being misjudged. It's about giving context, right? And so I think if you're giving context, that exists only in a moment based on someone's response. And
well,
I think
I'm going to give you a new band name called Momentary Identity.
Yeah.
Ooh.
But that's what an infinite being means. That's what a spiritual being means, is that we're alive and we're multifaceted. And right, and whatever comes at us because of our past experiences and our will, we respond to it differently. And we grow and we learn and we keep evolving. And so to me, if everyone identified each other as an infinite being, I think, right, we wouldn't feel so trapped by labels and titles. We'd recognize, because again, the word that we're using here to replace what I'm saying is fluid. And so to me, once you say the identity is fluid, right, you're saying exactly what I'm saying. But it's a defense against it instead of looking at it and saying, why are we even using this construct? What's useful about it?
You seem like kind of a deconstructionist to me, that you would like to deconstruct all identity and be left with the soul seed, which I think is not a bad thing. I mean, defining yourself with infinity or infiniteness okay. I would say that identity exists to conjure visions in another person's mind. Okay, language is actually a code, right? It's a code I'm using to send over a picture. So watch, I'll send you over a picture. A green box with 10 pickles dancing around of it. Okay, I sent you a picture. Wasn't that fun? Okay, now, but the thing is, if I say certain words about my identity, you're going to conjure a different picture. If you're going to say, I identify as a murderer, like all of a sudden the picture of me that you're conjuring is different than if I say, I identify as a pacifist. So I actually think there's something important about identity.
To manipulate people. You just said it. You just said it, to manipulate people. I mean,
no,
right?
It's to communicate the self.
But you don't know yourself enough to communicate the self. So it's pure manipulation. That's why if there's a question mark and there's curiosity about what I can be in any given moment, oh wow. Because infinite doesn't mean that you're infinite. It means that there's possibility, right? It's just more of living in a space of possibility rather than definition.
Okay, Bren, go ahead.
That's interesting. Well, I guess like I think labels are important for like certain safety reasons too. I don't know if I like labels, I guess, in the sense of like if someone comes up to me and say they're gender fluid, for example, and then I'm like, oh, cool, this is a person that I can relate to in a certain way because we both have done some sort of deconstructing of that social aspect of gender together. So there's something that we can meet eye to eye on. Whereas like you were saying, like if there was someone who identified as a murderer, like or whatever, like that label to me would want like I would want to protect myself through that label
But
because I
again,
want to
it's
avoid that.
it's pure manipulation,
Well,
right? Because if
it's
someone gives you a
influence.
label, but if someone gives you a label, right, the way you guys are defining it is you turn off your awareness to what you're actually observing, and you take their definition of their identity as. And most of the time, when we claim an identity, we'd have no idea what we're talking about. It's just all made up. And to me, this conversation is interesting because we keep defending it. And all I'm saying is that what's becoming obvious to me is it's a defense mechanism, right? Because it's all about protection. I don't want to get hurt. I want people to understand me, right? It's not about creativity because it's not about what possibilities can we create here.
Well,
It's about what I don't want to happen
I
or
hear the
how I
point that
want to
you're
manipulate the situation.
I hear the point that you're making by wearing your Ricky Williams shirt. You're limiting yourself from the possibility of being Andrea Gehrz, which I'm really sorry for your loss. I'm just kidding, but I'm just saying by even wearing a shirt with your name on it, you're limiting yourself from otherness, other possibilities. I mean, I guess I could say well, let's look at the gifts of Saturn versus the gifts of Neptune. The gifts of Saturn is constraint. It is boxes. It is structure. It's like without our gender and astrology host actually made the case for the binary in saying that without the binary, we have nothing to then kind of go infinite from. Like without this, like yes, no, or this, that, then we don't have any ground to stand on. So I think I get what you're saying, and I also would argue that there is also use of identity.
Of course. But my point is there's use of it, but let's not worship it. And let's use it like a tool instead of being imprisoned by it. If you think of how much like if you think of what identity has done, has it made people feel better or has it made people feel worse about themselves?
Okay, well, that's a really good discussion. Is identity helpful or harmful? Brent, have you ever, and I do want to get on to the next question, but Brent, have you ever found that your identity as non-binary has ever been limiting or harmful to you?
No, actually, I think it's the
Here we go.
actually opened. But again, it's breaking away from a label that I already had, which was like cis woman, right? That was a label that was like put on me.
Thank you.
And then by
Thank you.
me like discovering my gender fluidity and opening that, then this new label is actually like a bigger umbrella term. So actually, me identifying as trans just means that I don't identify with the gender I was assigned at birth. So that is much bigger to me and liberating more so than like that cis woman label that I had. But like, it's still a label.
It's
But
still the label game, right? It's like I free myself from one label to get into another one. And all I'm saying is we don't have to play the label game.
Yeah, that's actually good.
That's the only thing I'm saying is we don't have to play because the wound that's making us try to find the liberating label is that we're playing the label game. If you don't play the label game, you don't have to liberate yourself. You don't need liberating labels if you're not playing the label game.
Okay, now that's a good point. I'm going to sage for a second here. Okay, so this is the thing. Let's ask the question, though, if we said, okay, we are on the topic of identity politics, which it does exist. So Ricky is trying to deconstruct it, but we're going to pretend for this hour that it's a whole study that happens in universities everywhere, that it exists. Okay, so the question is, okay, Ricky, if someone walks in your office and you see they have a Gemini moon, can they say to you, I don't identify with my Gemini moon, I identify with a Cancer moon?
Mhm.
Will you let them do that?
I'll say it's a wound. I said, let's talk about the wound. Because from my perspective, and as an astrologer, if someone is not identifying with something, from my perspective, there's some wound there. Because
Okay.
if this represents our imprint of something deeper, more pervasive inside of us, and we're having difficulty identifying it, that's a problem. identifying with it, that's a problem.
Hey, Bren, what would you do if somebody did that in your office?
If they did what?
If they had a mathematically Gemini moon and they just said, I don't identify as having a Gemini moon, I identify as having a Cancer moon.
Well, I would probably say to that client, it's like a client like coming in saying that. I would probably just say that's really interesting. Maybe like we look into Vedic astrology or something because like the perspective there's so many different perspectives of astrology that could be true for that person, like I'm pretty open-minded when it comes to that kind of thing.
Okay, so I disagree. Like I'm a staunch I'm like to me the chart is genetics. It's the genesis for crying out loud. It's like if you have something in your chart is you're genetically predisposed to being wired that way in the soul senses machine, right? Like I if someone told me they don't identify, I'd say, well, mathematically and technically you are a Gemini moon. I'm sorry that you don't identify with that, but this is what you are. But that see how that's very similar to saying you were born XX chromosome, so you are female. See how this is astrology is identity politics.
Well,
Yeah.
I think this brings up a good point because the same question comes up, right? Like again, someone's to me that's information in and of itself, what someone chooses to identify as. And that's going to be something that's filtered through gender, through race, through their early life experiences, right? Something has taught them that identifying as this does not feel good. So I need to break free and identify as something else. And so for me, if I see that in the chart, I'm curious, right? What are the experiences that led to this identification? That to me, that's where the juice is.
Well, I think sometimes like I like to have an identity, like identify myself in certain ways because that helps other people treat me in a certain way that I feel more aligned with and that I feel more comfortable with. And even though that might be restricting, it does feel more safe for me. And maybe it does come from a wound or things like that, but like that does give me a sense of safety and respect from other people when it's like, oh, I identify as non-binary. I would prefer if you use they them pronouns for me because that's how I feel more free and most comfortable.
All I'm saying is just acknowledge that it's a pure defense mechanism.
But what if someone's
And we can use the right there's times where we need defense mechanisms 100% keep us safe. I'm just saying let's not make it a thing. Let's acknowledge what it is. It's a response to a wound. Then we can actually move to some healing instead of propping it up.
well, okay, like if someone said to me, like, well, I identify as a Cancer moon and I would prefer if you call me a Cancer moon. I see if I was being a liberalist, like it's like I honoring people's pronouns, like, I'll call people whatever pronoun they prefer, but will I call them whatever chart they prefer? No. I mean, I like this is where I'm a little bit like this is genetic. That's like me saying that's like someone saying, "Well, I know that I have Down syndrome in my chromosomal lineup, but I don't identify as having Down syndrome, so I would prefer if you call me as not being Down syndrome." I mean, it's like how much do we really get to defer from the mathematics of the chart? I mean, I think I'm trying to explore here in a Socratic way why do people treat charts as just like these floppy things that you can have or not have? It's like, isn't there some mathematic or some tangible something about that natal chart that is true or not?
That's a deeper philosophical question. I think is important. I think it's at the heart of everything we're talking about. And to me, it comes down to what is a chart?
Yeah, what is a chart
Yeah.
in terms of, I guess, identity?
To me, a chart is like the imprint of energetic or energies from, the planets that was imprinted on you when you took your first breath. So these are, energies that are implanted, like imprinted, I
It
should say, on you.
doesn't really answer the question, right? You have to have so much conceptual understanding for that even to make sense. I mean, again, I don't know if this right we can handle this question here, but I do want to go on note saying I think for any astrologer, I think wrestling with that question for your entire life, what does a chart represent, I think is useful and it'll help get you closer and closer to clarity about that. And realizing everything else in astrology that we build on top without having clarity of that to that question is to me it kind of made is arbitrary. I mean, some of us are more intelligent and we can recognize patterns more acutely than others, so we get by. But to me, it's this lifelong question of what does the chart represent. And for me, as I've asked that question more and more, I notice more things. Right? It's like that kind of curiosity and respect allows the chart to speak to me. And I would say, relative to identity, in my perspective, is I'd say someone's goal is to identify as much as possible with their charts. Is that if we're thinking about identity, if you go into the chart, you're identifying with potentials. You're not identifying with fixed things that make you have to defend against what those fixed things trigger in other people, because you're going to something that's deeper and more profound. So I'd say identity should be directly aligned with someone's chart.
Interesting. So I would say, after all these years, and I understand that you're saying it's an unanswerable question, but I will say after 25 years and two bouts of double-blind research, I believe that the chart is a map of our chakras. It's an electrical diagram of our chakras, our dermatomes, which are those electromagnetic swaths of skin. The ancient astrologers call it your esoterion, the map of your soul senses machine. In fact, they say that how your chart is built is how you're wired. Like if you're an Aries Pisces, you're built in the brainstem of Aries and then the whole aura of Pisces. And so we've got with Bren, we've got a brainstem whole aura animal of they are both living in that sensitivity and also that direct, head-on formation. And that if we just there's something mechanical about the chart, and whether or not you identify with it, you can drive around a Honda and be like, well, I identify with a Saab. It's a Saab to me or whatever. Like I get you can say that, but I mean, from where I'm looking, it's actually a mechanical diagram that you necessarily, I don't know, it is kind of true.
I mean, I don't know exactly what you mean by mechanical. To me, I feel like it's more constitutional, or we might even say elemental. But I think how those elements, I think that's where there might be more freedom, is how those elements interact. But I do think we're born with a certain constitution that has a tendency to behave in certain ways. Well, my favorite definition for what a chart is, it's like a hard disk. It's a hard drive of all of our past experiences.
Well, I would mechanically say. Sorry.
Just the past experiences? The chart is just the past experiences?
Well, it has to be just the past experiences because it notes the moment of birth.
Yeah, but it's also moving into the future with it.
But exactly. So, but we're not talking about what the chart becomes. I'm talking about what the chart is, and the chart, by definition, is the moment, right? The moment of birth. So at that moment, what I'm saying, that's what the chart represents. So it represents the sum total of all experiences up until that moment. And I talk to my students and I say a birth chart cannot describe an adult. It describes the moment of birth. But if you take 50 years to however million years before, okay, right? It's a work in progress. But what the chart is, we're seeing the work of the past that began with our first breath. And definitely we add to the chart. But if we're talking about what is the chart, this idea of the past experiences. And to me, that can fit a definition of mechanical, because someone has been doing the same thing over and over and over again, right? It's mechanical that they're going to keep doing something.
You're a Gemini sun, and I would say that wires your right eye into the throat chakra, which is why you're talkative, is because you take light and you send it down the right eye through the Ida and the Pingala to the throat chakra. So I would say your throat chakra is spinning faster than perhaps Bren's throat chakra, because they are not a Gemini, right?
That opens
Gemini
up
rising, so I'm also a throat spinner. I think that's mechanics.
But it's potentials, because I wasn't always talkative, right? And how many times have you met someone when you look at their chart and you see it's something that they had to grow into? I will say the past experiences, there's a predisposition that once that gets activated by the environment, oh, this feels really good, and I can see that I can really do this really well, and we might lean into it more. But if it's never activated by the environment because of culture, gender, or etc., then it doesn't materialize. And to me, this is the importance of understanding what I'm calling the environment, gender, culture, ethnicity, et cetera, because these are the things that our past, or the deeper potentials in us, are trying to manifest through. And so that's why the astrology I practice, we don't describe, we prescribe. We are saying, yes, you're a Gemini, so put yourself in situations where you are encouraged to open your mind so you can activate those potentials so you have something to contribute to the world.
Well, okay, so I think they can be both be true. Like, okay, Brent, feel free to interrupt. We're having a day here. So basically, let's say there's a car and it has brakes, right? That's a mechanical state of being. Do you press on the brakes? It depends. It depends on if the car's going fast and needs to stop. Do you spin your throat chakra around and talk? It depends on what you're doing, or like what we need to use the mechanicals of the machine to do.
Maybe, but if you're going to use a brake, think of Saturn. I think we can, if we're talking about brakes, we can talk about someone's Saturn. And we look at different charts. Everyone has a Saturn. Some people is really strong and dominant in their foot. They're always riding the brake. Okay. Some people it's tiny and the Jupiter is big and they know the brake is there. Okay. But they're not quite sure why to use it. Right. So yes. Right. That's why I'm saying we can say mechanical in the sense that safety, like Saturn will move towards safety. Right. Mars will express in the direction of aggression. Those are mechanical. But how much of that someone has? How skillful are they? Right. Again, we can have the mechanics, but how useful are you with the tools?
So is this conversation kind of like about free will versus fate within this? Because like, the energies are there, the potentials are already there, and then you're kind of saying that it's up to us to be able to channel those energies towards our highest good or through improvement or whatever, rather than
Whatever. I mean, whatever direction. It's just do it consciously is all
About
I'm trying
identity
to say.
politics. Like we're telling people as astrologers, I could tell you, Brent, I could be like, you're an Aries, and so you're this, this, and this, and you're a Pisces, and so you're this, this, and this. So I'm actually ascribing traits to you, giving you kind of things that you can either identify with or not. And that's political to tell people who they are. Like, I guess I'm making the point that just like with gender and telling somebody what their gender is, being an astrologer is highly political. To tell someone you are this, 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 and I'm being all mechanical about it, like, no, your throat chakra is spinning. It's obvious. Like I'm not going
right.
to let somebody be like, well, I don't identify as a Gemini. I was like, well, you are one. Like, doesn't that seem similarly political?
Well, I think it like also it's important to open up this conversation a little bit bigger too within the client perspective too, because I think it's really important to take what the client is saying into the conversation of evaluating a chart, because you could say, oh, you're a Gemini moon, so you're this, this, and this, but they're like, oh, I don't really identify with that. And then that leads into a deeper question, like, okay, then why? Is there something like maybe that Gemini moon is restricted by Saturn or whatever, and so they don't actually feel like that can be expressed or whatever? Or maybe it's showing up in the seventh house, and so that's actually the other people in their life and not them. So I feel like the client will probably know. I tend to just trust and listen to the client because they know themselves better than I do. Yes, I'm looking at a chart and yes, I see certain things, but also they've lived their entire life experience so far. So how they view themselves is important.
Okay. I think the thing that we're taking for granted here is that when an astrologer describes what it means to have a Gemini moon, that they're accurate. And that if the person doesn't identify with it, that it means that there's that to me, I've had so many times where I'm talking to someone about their chart and they say, they started off the conversation saying, I don't identify as blah, blah, blah. And at the end of the conversation, they said, the way you talked about it, I get it.
Hmm.
The way you talk about it, I get it. So to me, it's about a reflection of a deeper sense of identity. And I think because we don't have that reflection of a deeper sense of identity, the external identity, we just make shit up. It's not even relevant to what's really going on inside of us. And to me, that's the beauty of the chart is we can align inner identity, spiritual identity as possibilities, okay, that have expressed a certain way for millions of years and are attempting to manifest currently in this date and time. So I do think it's political, but from a religious/spiritual perspective, I think it's necessary. I started working on my future presidential campaign, and it's rooted in this idea that we're all made for something. And the more we can identify with what we are actually made of and made for, the more effective and efficient we can, and less confused we can be in the world.
Well, okay, so one of the reasons I deal with things very mathematically, like if they said I don't identify as my Gemini moon, I would say, okay, let's watch a transit to it and evaluate it on that day. So I'd say, okay, let's wait till the sun in Gemini goes over your moon, and then let's see how you're behaving. Because I'm going to be expecting that the throat chakra will be spinning wildly on that day. So it's like, so I'm going to err on the side of scientific and technicals, but I'll tell you why I've gotten to that point in my career. I'm a remedies person. I deal with the weirdest cases. Okay, people who can't stop talking, people who are violent offenders. We're trying to keep them out of prison. What I'm saying. So let's say someone has a Moon Mars Pluto conjunction in Scorpio in their first house, and they say, and they're a violent offender, right? Well, and we say, okay, you have a genetic potential for violence in your chart that is expressed cyclically, and they say, well, I don't identify as having that. I identify as having a Moon Venus conjunction. Well, I have to be the one who's like, well, absolutely, you do not, you have a Moon, Mars, Pluto. You are predisposed towards violence. We are going to time it. We are going to jump on you and bloodlet you. Like basically, like I'm actually that guy who's actually dealing with cases where we've lost the right to identify or disidentify because of behaviors. See what I mean?
Well, but to me, it's again in that situation, the way I would approach it is I would go to there's something going on for this person that they're not able to identify or perceive of something that is a real part of them. To me, that's the first issue. To me, that like, and again, I'm not here to remedy someone, right? I'm more of a philosopher, and so when I hit that in someone, I'm like, whoa, right? That this is what has to be dealt with. Because to me, if you can't see yourself clearly in the mirror, you ain't got a chance. You ain't got a chance, right?
Well,
If
yeah.
you always need someone else to tell you what you look like, ooh, who you are, I don't know.
I
I don't,
understand what you're saying too, but also life is a journey, right? Like, as someone who used to identify differently, and I know we're getting back to identities, but like, I could not have fathomed before I came out as trans that I was trans. Like, it didn't occur to me until like some sort of evolution or trigger like opened that world for me. And so then I evolved. And I feel like that's something that we have to take into consideration is like sometimes we can't see parts of ourselves because that's something we evolve into.
but you say part of yourself and you define trans as a part of yourself. And I would say you are something greater than that, that the only limited way it can manifest in this day and time is through trans. And if people are happy eating morsels, eating breadcrumbs, right, that's on them. But for me, I would have killed myself a long time ago. And I tried to fit myself in all the damn labels and even cool labels. And to me, it's like I need to get out of this label game because I can't take scraps, right? Just realizing that there's so much more to me than what other people define me as, or
That's
so much more to me than what other people say that helps me feel comfortable.
Well,
And
some
I
people
get
would say that that's a privilege you have because of I don't know, the conventionality of some of your expression. I mean, I'm not,
I would say this is the advantage I have because I don't play the label game. That's all that it is.
yeah.
That's the only privilege. And if you call it a privilege, right? If you're forced to play the label
Playing the
game,
vastness game.
I'm using the label game to my advantage.
Well, do you identify as a man?
But I'm saying when you're forcing me to identify as something, I don't even know what that means, if I'm being honest. It doesn't mean anything to me.
Hmm.
Then
Right, if you want to get to details,
what do you
do I
feel
have
like
a penis? Yes. Okay. Where do I like to put it? Okay, we can have that conversation. But man, why I don't even know what that means.
Wow.
It's just a social, people just make shit up. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to be
Well, that's
limited by
why
other people's opinions.
Well,
I'm just not going to do it.
there's all kinds of identity politics. Like Michel Foucault says that gender, for example, is just not just, but gender is a performance. And like we could say the chart is a performance. Like you're performing Gemini right now.
I don't know. I think there's a way you can express it. And I think ideally when your inner identity and your outer identity match, then I think it's a soulful spiritual performance. It's the Leela. You're actually showing up the way you were meant to show up.
Mhm.
But you're talking about identity still, like you're saying if the inner identity matches the outer identity, you're still talking about identity. So I guess my question is like in a world where labels are, inherently
Identity and
a lot of
labels are
our
not the same thing. Identity and labels are not the same thing. When I'm saying identity, I'm saying we exist as something. And I'm not going to limit it and say I exist as a man because it's not true.
I feel like you've stripped yourself down to just a chakra machine.
I mean, that's where we are in essence. And life is a journey. And I'm just saying, right, if we know the path to the journey and we know that we like to go slow and that we like to take the slow, painful route, then we get to do it. But if we like to take the quick shortcut to get right to it, then my advice is stop playing the label game. And the beauty of astrology is it gives you permission at least to upgrade your label game. And the deeper you're willing to go into asking the question of what does the chart represent, that label game can take you deep, deep, right?
Well,
It can take you to the core. It can take you to the core definition of identity, right? Existence as a spiritual being.
Go ahead, Bren.
I guess I'm just confused because you're saying, okay, we need to abandon labels, like labels are limiting all that stuff.
I didn't say abandon labels. That's
Ricky,
not what I'm saying.
Talk.
I just want clarity because like you're talking about labels and then you're saying labels are restricting. So I guess I just would like clarity on what you mean.
Okay, all I'm saying is, right, things that are restricting a belt, right, restricts it. And I know I use it for a reason. I'm just saying, let's not deify labels and make what everything is about. Let's call them what they are. Is they're temporary band-aids until we figure out who we truly are. That's all. That's all I'm saying.
We're a constantly evolving human. You know, one of the things, reasons I've gotten into the identity politics of gender and astrology and things like that is because of surgeries. Because a surgery is a one-way door decision, right? Of like if you're going to surgically alter your formation to match, a gender that you identify with. Well, the chart's a cyclical, fluctuating essence, and from a teleology perspective, we're always becoming a new thing. So I do agree with Ricky there that we're on this constant path of becoming. And so when people make surgical decisions, I get a little bit reticent because it's like you're becoming, like you could wear the wardrobe of a certain gender for 4 straight years, and then as the different part of your chart gets transited, you could go to it's like I do kind of see where the constant evolving nature of or any identity could be more liberating. I mean, what do you think of that, Bren? I mean, we're just philosophers. We're not trying to say one thing is correct or not, but.
Sure. I guess I don't know if I have anything to add to that necessarily. Because yeah, I guess I don't have anything to say with that. I guess I just want to know more about like what you've been talking also about in your classes and what your students' perspectives are as well that are differing from maybe like what we're talking about here too. Because like we're getting just a few perspectives, but I'm really interested to know like more if there's other people who with other opinions.
Okay, well, okay, well, really, no one is taking issue with identity as much as Ricky, so we've gotten further in the discussion. I mean, with the abolishment of identity itself, it kind of kills the identity politics topic. But
well, it's not abolishing it; it's understanding that it's a wound and it requires healing, not promotion.
Okay, I'm not promoting it. I'm deconstructing it.
Perfect.
What does that mean? Can I ask you, Ricky, like what does it mean it's a wound? Like to identify as something. Does that include the astrological conversation? Like if I identify as an Aries moon, does that mean that I'm wounded? Or is that just if I identify as like a trans person?
Well, when we say, does that mean I'm wounded? Everyone is wounded the way I'm using the word. So it's not pointing people out. It's noticing, right, is that we can call it evolution, we can call it growth, but the nature of evolution and growth is it comes from something is festering, doesn't feel good, and then we attend to it and we grow and we learn because of the process. And I'd say more than half of our lives, if we're being honest, are way more than half are manifestations of wounded behavior. Right? That's why we have religion. That's why we have spirituality. That's kind of the whole point of it all. And I'm saying when we can recognize what is real and what is not, right? That's a manifestation of healing, of clarity, spiritual development, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. And I'm saying if we stay playing the label game, you can't get out. You just stay trapped because it's just based on other people's judgments.
It's fun to play the label game. In fact,
I'm not saying if you're playing it, if you're playing the game, and it's really playing.
Many people, for example, many people think that if I say is gender apparent in the chart, that I'm like this cis white person being like gender is it genetic or whatever. But actually, I'm celebrating like the diversity of the human form with these like kind of like it's like rolling around on the human form in this kind of playful way of like, what about this? What about this? Okay, it's like I enjoy identity politics personally. Like
you have that luxury, but if you think of how many people suffer because of it,
Well, okay,
That's my only motivation, right? Even when I see the people that are liberated by labels, they're liberated from the suffering that they got because of labels.
well, yeah, okay, here's an example of that. Like I was given a schizophrenia diagnosis, and then I totally identified with it because I was like, thank you for that, because my moon square no Neptune is tripping balls cyclically, right? So I was like liberated by the label because I was like, okay, now everyone can see I'm kind of struggling with hallucinations. Well, after like 10 years, 4 years of being on my meds and like working at this extremely high level, and like my baby daddy keeps perseverating on my schizophrenia, finally I was like, you're a Munchausen, I'm fine. Stop Munchausen me, because I wanted to be liberated from the identity of schizophrenia. And now I'm liberated from it. I'm like, yeah, I just really
But it's still the game, though, right? What if you liberated yourself from the label game? And I'm not even trying to say you should. It's just strange to me that I keep saying it, and it's like you guys don't see it.
Well,
It's like
I think it's impossible because my family needed that schizophrenia label to be liberated at that point, and then now I need to shake it to be liberated at this point. And I feel like they're concepts that
Do you
liberate.
feel the wound, though? Do you? I'm just all this is all I'm
I don't
pointing out.
perseverate on woundedness. I don't.
That's not what I'm saying, but everything you're saying is a response to something bad happening. That's all that it's not creative. I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying, right? Because if you go back and listen to this conversation, when I really grind down on what is the possibility for labels, it's always defending against something. That's all I'm trying to point out.
You identify as a dad.
Oh my God. Again, right? But do you see how we're trying to force someone into something for our own safety? And right, so all I'm saying is
our own safety, because like if I just am asking you, like, do you identify as a dad? Like, then I will understand. Like, if
I don't even know what that means.
But if you like, I think of a dad as someone who has a child. Like,
perfect. Okay, that's your definition. You don't even know what my definition is. So when we start about how I identify, and even if we say the same words, we assume we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah, but how can we ever?
Because even if you ask half of my kids, if I was a dad, half of them would say yes, half of them would say no.
I identify as your dad, Ricky.
Yes. Again, like, to me, I'm not even trying to defend for or against. I just think it's interesting that we're not willing to look at it. And we're just willing to fight for the necessity of it. And we're not even willing to acknowledge that it's our security blanket, right? There's nothing wrong with that at all. We all need security blankets when we've been hurt until we can feel better. But I'm saying the end goal is creative, and titles, labels limit our ability to be truly creative. That's all that I'm saying.
Well, okay, we hear your point that don't let identity limit you, or
yes.
I mean, I get
and recognize where it is, and that's the tricky part, because it's like you said, when I got diagnosed with social anxiety disorder, I had that same liberating feeling, but when I really thought about it, it was the expectation of the label that I'm not supposed to be like that. That was the issue in the first place. Mm-hmm. So, right, it's just if you stay on that, I'm saying if you stay on that track, you're going to waste a lot of time and energy. And I'm really saying this from a place of compassion.
I've studied labels extensively because I've been an identity politician for 25 years. In fact, my major in college was queer theory and identity politics. But I will tell you that sometimes labels are necessary for people to get services. For example, somebody might say, in order for me to get housing, I need to identify as houseless or something. I don't know what it is, but I mean, there are reasons that. I mean, I think
of course, manipulation.
Humans exist with thought pictures and sending thought pictures through words. That is what a label is. It's a thought picture.
Manipulation, like I said.
No, it's not manipulation. That would be the nefarious use of thought pictures.
Well, that's your judgment. That's your judgment of the word manipulation. The word means skillful use of the hands.
Man, right? This is a deconstructionist episode. Okay, Bren, go ahead.
I don't know. I guess I'm confused, like how we can ever live in this world. And I know that labels have
yes.
things,
Ricky,
but like
we're finally getting somewhere, though. I'm saying we're getting to the confusion part. That's the basis of all of it.
That's what I identify as your dad. Be quiet. Okay, Bren, go ahead.
I guess I just don't know like how identifying as like a dad, for example, is like a wounded thing. Because that's just like helping other people understand, oh, this is like a social role that you play in the world.
If you keep it at that level, that's not what I'm saying. I'm talking about the harm that it does. When someone says, I'm a dad, what does that mean? right? I have different experiences of my father and what it means to be a dad than someone
Okay,
else,
I have a
right?
question I really want to know. Okay, how can somebody identify with their tropical chart and their Vedic chart both?
I don't know that, but I do have a response to identifying as a dad that I think can tie this together. Right. To me, the identification, if it's meaningfully attached to someone's chart, then it's a completely different story. So if someone has strong Cancer placements, and they identify as a dad because it's an expression of their deeper potentials, right? Then that identification becomes a channel. It's not limited. So again, I'm not saying that these are bad. I'm saying that they have to be connected to something deeper and more profound. If someone is identifying as trans or queer or whatever, my question is, where is this in the chart? Because the identification is just an expression of the chart. Is it conscious or is it unconscious? And if it's conscious, I think those labels are beautiful things because they're channels, mediums to express our deeper potentials.
I'm just imagining one of Ricky's children trying to come out to him. That it's like that didn't go well. Dad didn't
I'm
really.
telling you, I was like with my kids, I was like, I asked them, I said, listen, I said, as long I have the chart, right? To me, as long as there's a match between the inner potentials and what's showing up external, I don't even care what it looks like. My whole thing is just be conscious of who you are and do it on purpose. That's it.
I see what you mean.
Well, okay, wait, Bren, though, I'm curious, how do you think somebody can identify with their tropical and Vedic at the same time?
Well, like I was kind of saying earlier, I feel like all different branches of astrology can offer you different perspectives of the same thing. So, Vedic astrology also, they have some different I don't know a lot about Vedic, so like I'm kind of speaking out of my ass here a little bit, but like, it does they do have different practices within that like that system that is different than like, tropical, for example. So I just think it's just a different perspective. I think you cannot, we're very complex beings. There's a lot of different things that play into our lives. I just think it's a different perspective of the same life.
It's
Yeah.
almost like it would
So
almost be like being like both like a two-spirited, right? If you said I have my tropical and my Vedic, you're like I'm male and female. Like I think like you can hold space. That's like dialectic thinking when you hold space for two seemingly divergent thoughts at the same time. I think that would be a beautiful example of that.
Well, I mean, it's a good question, but I think it's a little simplistic. And I studied Vedic astrology profoundly for 3 years before I started studying Western astrology. And so to a certain extent, I had to wrestle with this question. And I think someone who spent time studying both, right, can appreciate the worldview or the perspective that Western astrology came out of, can appreciate the worldview that Vedic astrology came out of. And I think it gives the opportunity to reconcile between the two. Because when I sat down with the Vedic astrologer, I resonated with what he was saying because I could appreciate his cultural perspective, his cultural lens.
Okay, a similar question would be, Bren, what would you do if somebody's like, I don't like the sun in my ninth house, so I use a different house system to put it in my 10th house?
That's fine. I don't know. I don't really mind because like if that's what makes that person, if a person's drawn to that, I feel like that's also their inner, maybe intelligence telling them to lead that way because, I just feel like whatever is going to be useful for you, it's astrology ultimately to me is a tool. So like if that is the tool that you need for that point in time, because maybe that's what that person needs in that moment, and maybe they can expand their mind another time. But if that's where they're at, you got to meet them where they're at in the moment.
Hmm.
So I mean, I use whole sign and like I could use Placidus, I could use all these other systems, but whole sign to me is just like the easiest for me to like just deal with.
Yeah. It's interesting how some astrologers are like, no, whole sign is real, it is factual, it is real. And other people are like, whatever house system you want. And like, I think it just so mimics like the gender conversation of like, you are what you are genetically, or like it's whatever you identify with. And I think to elevate astrology into this kind of identity politics sphere is really a good thing because astrology gets diminutized into this like tiny woo-woo, gumball machine of nothingness. But it's like really when you look at it, it's like it's severe at how evolved it is.
hmm Well, and also everyone has different perspectives. Like the same astrologer can look at the same chart and see something completely different because we all have different perspectives and our own lens. We have our own perspective and limitations within our own biases, just because of our own limited life experience. So I think that is also something to take into consideration of evaluating any chart too. Everyone can see it differently,
Mhm.
even though it's all the same. It looks the same.
It's like a Rorschach, it's like a Rorschach by the astrologer kind of on
Definitely.
Well,
Definitely.
I think that comes back to each astrologer, whether they're aware of it or not, has to wrestle with the question of what is a chart. Because based on how you answer that question, all right, your perspective, that to me, that's the number one thing that's going to change your perspective when you look at a chart.
hmm
nice.
It's also like why are you using astrology again? It's like what tool are you using it for? Are you using it to help understand yourself? Are you using it to plan an elective surgery or something? Like why are you using astrology and how can it be this tool be most useful for you in the moment? I think that's more the most important thing for me, at least in client work with astrology. It's like, how is this helpful? If it's
I
not
agree,
helpful,
but I feel like it's important to point out that even that question is built on top of what is a chart, right? Because if you're using something but you don't know what it is, right, and we do it all of us do it all the time. It blows my mind, and I think we're missing something by not spending more time really trying to have a clear sense, right? And it's I don't think it's unanswerable. I just think we have to keep at it. I think it's the mystery of what is a chart. Because if the more clarity you have about what is a chart when you're talking about how to use it, wow, it's a completely different conversation.
Ricky, you're not in trouble, but I will say this. I am renaming this episode into the deconstructionism with Ricky Williams. Okay, I thought it was identity politics, and it wasn't. Okay, all right. Well, listen,
okay.
Brent, thank you for coming and being pummeled by Ricky. That was crazy.
Pleasure. I learned a lot. I really appreciate different perspectives. It's really nice to be challenged because it makes you think like, oh yeah, okay, like what does this mean? Investigate. So thank you for your perspectives.
Ricky has a
Oh yeah.
Mars Venus conjunction in Aries, so that was fun for him. Okay.
Oh, hell yeah. That makes perfect sense, actually.
And I identify as him having that. So, all right. Ricky, you know what?
Thank you.
I love you. I just love you. I'll see you
Yes.
next week. All right, bye.
Yes.
Y'all,
All right,
bye.
thank you.
It's great to meet you, Brent.
You too.